With a bright blue flash and a loud pop, the light burned out. Nothing new. How many times had it happened in her 23 years of life? Too many to remember. She laid there for a few moments, letting her eyes adjust to the dim light coming from under the door. She didn't know if it was her imagination or not, but with the light now gone, it seemed cooler. She stretched before getting up and taking the few steps to her door. No big deal, she thought as she stepped into the hall. There were spare bulbs in the kitchen drawer. As she turned to close her door, she looked up at the fixture and noticed that the light bulb had actually cracked down the middle. That was unusual, and for a moment she was afraid of it breaking in her hand when changing it. Shaking her head, she closed the door and turned toward the kitchen, only making it a few steps before a bright blue flash and a loud pop caught her attention. Now plunged into darkness a second time, she stopped short, letting her heart settle, and took a few deep breaths. This was a little ridiculous, she thought, as she inched her way toward the end of the hall where the light switch was. When was the last time they had changed them? Could it be a power surge? With still slightly trembling fingers, she felt for the switch and jumped as a bright blue flash and a loud pop startled her. Really? She thought as she pulled her phone from her pocket. She had never been afraid of the dark before, but something about this was setting her on edge. She cursed under her breath as she saw her battery only on 15%. She didn't realize the charger had stopped working while she was researching her paper. She used the dim light to make her way hurriedly to the center aisle, where all the communal supplies were. She pulled open every drawer but could not find a light bulb. She didn't know why she felt so terrified, but she desperately wanted a light. It didn't help that the curtains in the living room barely let in the hellish orange glow from the campus lamps. Turning to go back to her room, her phone powered down, and she felt tears well in her eyes. More panicked than she had ever been, she frantically searched by feel for a pack of matches or a lighter. She could hear her heartbeat in her ears as she finally found an old matchbox with 3 matches left in it. She attempted to light the first one, but it broke in her shaking fingers. With a cry of frustration, she tried to calm herself enough to light the second, but when she did, a shadow appeared in front of her. She instantly dropped the match with a scream. Bolting down the hall towards her room, clutching the single remaining match, she felt a little relief as she made it inside and closed the door behind her yet again. It had to have been her own shadow. She felt stupid for being unreasonably terrified. She laughed at herself. Feeling a bit safer, she locked the door and went to her desk, where she kept a small collection of scented candles. She lit them and placed them around her room for light, and started to calm down. She sat down on her bed, wiping away her tears, and she found her charger. It had come unplugged from the wall sometime, and that's why it had failed to charge her phone. She plugged it back in and laid down, now highly annoyed that she was rooming with a couple of partiers. If she had found girls who liked to study, she wouldn't be here alone on a Friday night. As she laid there in the cool silence, she suddenly heard glass breaking from another room. She dared not to move as she tried to turn her phone on, but it was still dead. She screamed as she heard a pounding on her door, and it was only seconds after that the particle board door splintered in its frame. With the sudden gust, the candles went out, and the last thing she saw was the glint of a knife. With a panicked scream, she sat up and looked around. The light was on, and her phone was charging. What a horrible nightmare, she thought as she pulled her blanket up around her shoulders. Just as she started to relax, with a bright blue flash and a loud pop, the light burned out.